host for this and that and everything in between. Today, I want to do a special video about service dogs. This is the things that people with and without service dogs need to know. Um, Recently, I've noticed that an increasingly large problem with people engaging individuals, excuse me, with service animals has become a huge problem. Now, I kind of want to talk about that today. So, let's start with recognizing what is a service animal. So, a service animal can be a dog of any breed, any size, any weight class, or here's a fun thing, or a miniature pony. Let's stop that because that's getting annoying. So back to what I was saying. A service dog can be any breed, any size, as long as the service that is provided from the animal is not a weight required service, such as a seeing eye dog. Um, because we have a lot more disabilities that can be, or health issues, not just disabilities, but health issues that are not visible to the average person, but animals can actually provide aid to. So individuals with irregular heart situations, breathing problems, allergies, psycho traumatic problems, uh, anything to that effect, where the animal is providing a service to the person. That is why that is a service animal, not just a regular pet. And there's a difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal. An emotional support animal is an animal that's just cute and provides you with comfort. The service animal actually performs a job, and there is a laundry list of jobs that a service animal can perform on a day-to-day basis. Now, in general public, every state has its own leash laws in a city by city, county by county situation. On a federal level, there are no leash laws for animals or pets of any kind. On a state level, most states don't have a leash law. Usually, leash laws begin on the municipality level, which is like the city or the county. They have laws and rules that they expect you to abide by for your pet. Now, the reason why I say that is because a service animal is first addressed on the federal level and then reinforced on the state level. There are no service animal requirements, obligations, rules, regulations on the city or county and municipality level. So I say that because on a state and federal level, in every state, it's going to be written in a different format in each state. It's going to be cited differently in each state. The federal law is going to be the same across the country, but in the state law that directly applies to what civil action you'll be taking if they violate your rights is going to be different from state to state. So if you travel or if you exist in more than one state, then you want to know what the state laws are and what cites that law in the state that you're in or going to. So that when you encounter these Karen style people that like to come up and engage you just because you're in possession of a service animal, you can inform them of the law. I've had this situation happen a number of times over the past 7 years that I've had registered service animals. So, and a lot of times I'm very frustrated with the people because of the demeanor and approach that they provide. But a lot of times, I'm very informative about the fact that they're completely misinformed. And that has led me to determine that I should probably just start informing people, just literally auditing their position and then putting forth the ability to educate them if they're willing to receive the education. And then if not, then, taking whatever steps I need to take on the back end. But I want to start here with you guys. So first, your service animal is not required to be on a leash by state and federal regulation in every state. as long as it is a trained one, first off, to function off of the leash, and two, if having it leashed will compromise the service animal's ability to perform its job, or that it will compromise your safety in handling the service animal. Now, most states are going to have the alternative to having it on a physical, they're going to say tethered, which is a visible leash. They're going to say that in lieu of or instead of the animal being tethered to its owner, that voice commands, hand signals, body gestures, and it's been updated in most recent times, electronic devices. And the reason why it's updated to electronic devices is because bark collars, shock collars, any type of electronic device, your cell phone, any type of electronic device that can control your animal when your animal is not tethered to you is allowed, because the goal of the law and the design of the law is for you to maintain control of your animal in public, which is the reason why they have leashes. Most people who have pets do not give their animals instructions. They just pull them. If the dog is going and they don't want it to go, they just pull them back. If the dog is not moving when they want the dog to move, they just pull the dog. But they don't actually give the dog a command. Trained animals, whether they be service animals or not, you give them an instruction instead of just pulling them. And when you give them an instruction, they follow the instructions. Sometimes, depending on the level of training, you may have to give them the instruction more than once. But you give them the instruction, and then they perform that instruction. Now, one of the things that I've noticed in recent times is when you go into a public place, and it's a public place because it is providing a service to the public, we find that a lot of people come up and say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, and then their first excuse is because this is private property. So, recapping real quick, you should have your animal on a leash if your animal is not trained to be off a leash, but if your animal is trained to not be on a leash, you don't have to have the animal on a leash. They tell you that you can't walk your animal in the building because its job requires it to be off of the leash. They can't tell you that because your animal is trained to function this way. This is the job that's provided for you. There are HIPAA laws that you are not supposed to violate to prove to the establishment that you have a trained service animal. So their first excuse is you can't do that because this is private property. So they believe that because it is private property, they can tell you what to do that supersedes the law. That's not true. Fact is that because it is private property, law enforcement cannot readily get involved with the situation without being called by an authorized party of the property. So whether it be the owner of the property, the owner of the business on the property, the manager or authorized personnel representing the legal authority of the establishment on the property can call the police because it's private property. But a random cop can't come out of nowhere and say, hey, you can't do that here because it's private property. So they cannot tell you you can't do something because it is private property, because the policies of the property that is providing a public service must succumb to the law first and then do whatever it is that they want to do outside of that. So they can't tell you that you must compromise the law in order to, utilize their services. That's not true. So, second thing, they are not required to engage you. So a lot of times they come up, and I've had it happen to me a couple times, quite a few times actually, where they come up and say, oh, well, I'm required to, it is the law that I come and ask you these two questions. No, the ADA has restricted questioning of service animals to two specific questions. Is it a service animal, yes or no? And what job does it perform? Now, the job or task of the service animal typically triggers owners of the service animal to tell the person who's asking the question what condition that you have that requires you to possess the service animal. You're not actually telling them what task you're performing. You're just willfully telling them that, It's a seeing eye dog. It's a dog for allergies. It's a dog for PTSD, whatever. That you're not telling them what task. You're just volunteering the medical condition that causes you to have that dog. And when you volunteer that medical condition, they're, oh, well, that's a service dog condition, and then they walk away. But the establishment is not allowed by law any rights to determine if you actually have a service animal and if you are willing or allowed to come into the building with the service animal, like that, telling them what your service animal is here for. Doesn't It's not like they can tell you, oh, well, that doesn't apply here, so you can't bring your animal in here. So for example, if my animal is supposed to be able to detect peanut oil, right? Because if I were allergic to peanut oil, and my animal is supposed to sniff my environment and make sure that there is no peanut oil in the environment. Now, I could be in, say, hospital, where normally you would not experience something like that. However, cross contamination is contact between more than one surface area. So a patient could have come in and used some hand lotion that may have peanut oil concentration in it for whatever reason, and then touch one of the chairs in the lobby. And nobody has wiped off that chair since that person got up. And now you come to sit in that chair, and you could come in contact with that peanut oil. Now, if you go to sit in the chair and the dog starts barking, don't sit in that chair, because your dog is supposed to detect the peanut oil. Now, they're going to tell you, well, it's a hospital. We don't have peanut oil here, so you can't have the dog in here. They can't tell you that. So fact is, you can answer the question, but you reserve the right not to. And they cannot force you to answer the question, and they cannot force you to vacate the premises because you didn't answer the question. Because if they do, and you allow them to, then you can sue them. And it is a funny thing that on a federal level, the first offense for violating ADA rights is a fine to the establishment and potentially the person that caused the problem in the excess of $75,000 and upward of $150,000 for every violation after that. And violations of the ADA law is violating equal access, meaning telling me that I can't be here because I have this animal, specifically because I have this animal, and depriving me of equal enjoyment, meaning that you're targeting me because I walked in with a service animal, and now you're coming to engage me where you otherwise would not engage anyone if they did not have a service animal. That is also harassment, which also compromises equal enjoyment. These are just a few. So, and I recommend that you go back and look at your Department of Justice listings of all of the rights and privileges that you have for possession of a service animal. But I want to make clear here, for the sake of this conversation, because I'm going to do quite a few more shows of this since this is becoming a more common issue, is that if you enter an establishment, you're in possession of a service animal, your animal is contained. Contained means that it's reasonably within the realm of your person. It's not like 20 feet ahead of you sniffing somebody's butt. It's literally with you. It's either at your side, walking in front of you, something to that effect. It might be walking around you or whatever, because these are our jobs and tasks of a service animal. I actually took it upon myself to make sure that I notated at least 19 different tasks that my service animal performs on a daily basis. And you should do the same and memorize these tasks as this animal performs these tasks, because it is important when somebody asks, what task does your animal perform, that you answer the question directly with the task. Don't tell them your medical condition. That's a HIPAA violation. They ask you that to trick you into telling them, oh, well, I have my dog for PTSD, or, I have my animal for emotional support. As soon as you say emotional support, red flags. They're going to tell you, well, it's an emotional support animal. You can't have it here, blah, blah, blah. And then they will continue to harass you until you leave the building. If you have a service animal and it's a legitimate service animal, they ask you what task that your animal provides, One of the many tasks. They don't have to be performing that task right now. It's just one of the many tasks that your animal performs in a day. If you remember one of them off the top of your head and you tell them what task it is. If, for example, one of the tasks that my animal does is guides me in the correct direction. Now, she's not a seeing eye dog. I'm not blind. But if in the event that I'm experiencing some health issues and I may forget where I was going, the dog knows where I'm supposed to be going. So I follow the dog. So even without a leash, my animal will lead me in the direction of where I'm intending to go. So so my dog leading the way without a leash is a task. And if somebody asks what are one of the tasks that your service animal does? Well, my animal is somewhat of a it provides me with guidance towards where I'm trying to go. Or, for example, I have another one that's easier to remember. Is like my animal knows all of the emergency exits. My animal actually, you depending on what animal you have, but let's say for the sake of specific types of animal, my particular animal has the ability to enter the room first and case the room for threats, and also orbit my person, and also put distance between me and the general population. Not just put distance between me and a threat, put distance between me and the general population. So, if in the event that my condition could become compromised, my animal will behave in a fashion that will force you to back up. Now, knowing this, these I just gave you like five. And this is just like leaving from the car, going into a building. My animal will lead the way. My animal will know where the entrances and exits are. My animal will orbit my person. My animal will put distance between me and the general population. And my animal will enter the room first and case the room for a threat. Five. So when they ask you what task does your service animal performs, give them a task. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a task that hints towards what your condition is. It's just one of the tasks. If, for example, my animal is supposed to keep track of my belongings, that's it. If I leave something somewhere, my animal is supposed to make sure that I don't leave it. That's it. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense to them. It's just if there's a task, it's a task. Whatever the task is, they cannot use that task to determine if you have a service animal or not, or whether or not your animal is allowed to be in a building. So what we want to pay attention to is what actually qualifies for a service animal to be in a building. Now, you enter an establishment, you have an animal with you. The medical need is the legal requirement in the lawsuit, and the capability for the animal to be trained. Now, because we have a lot of people who fake service animals, that you can go and buy service animal vests from online. They don't necessarily have to come from a reputable source. It just has to have a service dog patch on the harness. Putting a service dog harness on your animal does not help you. You can do it, and in a civil action, it actually weighs better in your favor because you had a service animal, you had the service animal vest, and they still encountered you negatively. So when the animal is identified as a service animal, there's less stuff that they can do. If the animal is not identified as a service animal upon approach, then they can claim that they're trying to investigate whether or not it is a service animal. So in those situations, there's a lot more harassment that they can give you and less negative fallback on that harassment. So I kind of want to give you the idea that you don't have to. It is not required by law. And if somebody tells you that, oh, you got to have a vest on that, no, you don't. They tell you you got to have a leash on that, no, you don't. Here's another one that is interesting. They tell you that you have to have a documented ID card for the service animal. No, you don't. And if they ask you for it, they're violating the law. So here you are in a situation where you can go through the motions of taking legal action against them, or you can complain to their supervisor about it and hope that if you make frequent entries to this establishment that they don't make this a habit. But if they make this a habit where you walk into the building, your animals stay to themselves, they're not engaging other people, and then they see you on their surveillance cameras. And usually the biggest issue with this is usually that an employee of the establishment comes to you without a prior complaint from anyone else, comes to you and engages you about your service animal. That is deprivation of equal enjoyment and equal access to the establishment. And that is also harassment, because you have targeted me because you saw me with a dog on the camera, and you decided because you saw me with a dog on the camera that you were going to come and engage me, not because the animal did something. And that's what people fail to understand. The establishment reserves the right to come and determine if you have, not determine, but address the fact that you may be in possession of a service animal when your service animal is becoming a public nuisance, not before. Now, they're not committing any criminal laws, but they are violating civil laws that could lead you to a civil suit. Now, your civil suit is more readily served when you have a history of negative behavior. So the first time they do it, you don't want to just run out there and go and sue them the first time they do it. But if you go here often, you want to record each time that they negatively impact your situation. And then you want to be able to make it a regular occurrence. So when they come and they talk to you, it's like, okay, so I talked to, like for example, I engaged somebody by the name of James. After I talk to him, the next time I talk to somebody, it's like, well, I've already talked to James about it. You need to go talk to James. They're going to say, well, I'm not James. James not here today. I'm asking you today. It's like, no, this is the second time that somebody has talked to me about this. I've already talked to you guys about this. I'm not talking to you guys about it again. You can do that. And they can continue to harass you about it, because until you answer those questions that you don't have to answer, they will continue to harass you because you have an animal. Not because your animal is a nuisance, not because a complaint was filed on the animal, because you have an animal. And that is the discrimination and deprivation of equal access and equal enjoyment. Because if you're sitting somewhere, and let's say, for example, you have a service animal, and a lot of people do this, is if you have a service animal, your animal's cute. People want to come up and pet your animal. They're not supposed to pet your animal. But if they ask you first and it does not compromise your animal's training and you allow it, then you can allow them to pet your service animal. Now, if this turns into a petting zoo situation where your animal is sitting there respectfully waiting, and there's 10, 15 people sitting over here petting your dog, the security guards can't come up and tell you, oh, I'm sorry, sir, you can't do that here. No, I'm not the problem. I didn't walk in here and with a sign that said, pet my dog. I was trying to go about my day. One person's kid wanted to pet my dog, and now I've got 10, 15 people over here petting my dog. I didn't do this. I'm trying to shop. So you can't tell me that I can't do this. What you need to do is tell the other customers, don't engage the service animal. If you're going to come in and engage yourself in that kind of situation. So if you're in a mall and 2, 3 people come up and start petting your dog, and security wants to come up and give you a problem behind it, it ain't you. You didn't say pet my dog. You were going through the store minding your business, and they came up and pet your dog. And because of that, the security needs to tell them, don't engage service animals, which they're not violating any policies of the establishment. They're not breaking any laws. They got your permission. But if the security is going to say something, they're going to talk to the other person. They're not going to talk to the owner of the service animal, because the owner of the service animal is the victim of the engagement. The owner of the service animal did not encourage the engagement. They're the victim of the engagement. So that is harassment to go and torment the owner of the service animal because other people are engaging that owner's service animal. So deprivation of equal access and equal enjoyment. Another thing, if you have your animal off of the leash and you're operating your animal with an electronic device, a lot of times some people who are not up to date with the laws, they will argue with you about whether or not you should have your animal on a visible leash. And especially in states where there is a state law and a city ordinance for a leashed animal, the state law that refers to service animals has in that same paragraph, in that same subsection that talks about the service animal being on a leash, that same paragraph also clearly says that the animal can be off of the leash if other factors are involved. As I mentioned before, voice commands, hand gestures, body language, audio commands, electronic devices. So if you have an electronic device on your animal, you don't necessarily have to use it just because it's there, and your animal follows your voice commands. you are succumbing to the requirements of the law. You don't have to do anything else. Now, I've seen a TikTok video a few times over the past week where a lady is allegedly allowing them to eject her from an establishment because she's in possession of a service animal. They can't do that. And you don't have to let them do that. If you're shopping, if you go into a grocery store with your service animal and you're shopping, go shop. They can't put you out. They cannot put their hands on you. So just refuse to leave. Keep doing whatever it is that you're doing. They can call for backup. They can have 10, 15 people there. They can get their supervisor. Their supervisor can call local law enforcement. Now you've got like 7 security guards and 2 cops. And once the cops walk in, the cops are going to tell them, you can't do anything. They're not going to do anything. The police are not going to do it. They can't trespass you for being in a building with a service animal. That is not being a public nuisance. So if you refuse to answer the question and then they decide to escalate the situation because you refuse to answer the question, then you can stand there and see how far they're willing to take it. And then after they've taken it to a reasonable enough extreme, then you take legal action of everybody involved. So for example, if they decide, oh, well, they're going to trespass you because you didn't answer the question. Not because your animal is a public nuisance, because you didn't answer the question. Okay, fine. Let's wait for law enforcement. Law enforcement's going to come. I'm going to explain the situation to law enforcement. You're going to explain the situation to law enforcement. Law enforcement's going to understand that they're going to say, well, it's a service animal. I'm not trespassing a service animal because now the police can get sued. But if you get a cop that doesn't know what's going on and that cop wants to follow through with the trespass for the sake of the trespass, then you'd say, okay, good. Now you're getting everyone's name because the person that is trespassing you has to identify themselves. The police officer has to identify themselves because they issued you the trespass. And the entity that's trespassing you. Now you've got three people to sue. And because they're now compromising your ability to have equal access as well as equal enjoyment and harassment because you're in possession of a service animal. Now this only applies when you have a calm and contained, not necessarily quiet. Because one of the things that a dog is required to do, especially dogs, because this could be dog or horse, is that they can notify you, however they do notify you of whatever their job title is. So if somebody's around a corner, they're supposed to notify you that there's somebody around the corner. That means that the dog might bark. That means that the horse might neigh. That does not mean that the animal is attacking the person that's around the corner. That means that the animal is notifying the owner that there is someone around the corner. Because of that, now you recognize who is around the corner, confirm that that person is not an issue to your physical or mental health, and then you request that your animal stands down. Once you request that your animal stands down and your animal stands down, your animal is contained. Now, you could be, say, in a public library, somebody's trying to sneak up behind you, your dog barks. They want to say, well, you can't have your dog in here because your dog barks. Hey, my dog is supposed to tell me when somebody's behind me. You cannot tell me that my dog cannot do its job because I'm in a library. However, what a lot of people do who have service animals is they try to put themselves in a position where they're less likely to impact the general population. So if you're sitting in an area where a lot of other people are sitting, you usually sit away from everybody else. You don't have to, but you choose to. If you have an animal and it's like elbow to elbow seating, you might decide not to sit. You might stand away from everybody else. They cannot force you to sit down because that's tradition, because you're not required to sit down. They are required, and I've heard this too, it's lovely. Oh, you must sit down because of the fire code. No, the fire code restricts a limited number of people to be in this building in order for it to be safe. And once that number is exceeded, then no one else can come in. I am not required to be seated to meet the head count. It's the number of people in the room or the number of people in the building. So whether I'm sitting or standing doesn't matter. But to help you with your head count, if there's a limited number of people that's supposed to be here and I'm going to stand in front of a chair, that's it. I'm not required to sit. So moving on, we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do is one, know what your dog is designed for. Why you bring your dog with you. Keep that in mind. If they ask and you want to tell them, you tell them. If you want to escalate the situation into an argument back and forth, because they can ask, but you don't have to answer, they can escalate the situation. They can ask you to leave. You don't have to. They can call law enforcement. You can hang out. It is what it is, and then you can elevate the situation. They can try to trespass you. Then because they know who you are, the next time you come back, they can stop you at the door where they're targeting you now because they know who you are. You didn't cause a problem last time, but because you didn't succumb to their authority, they pose you as a threat to their authority, not to the safety of the environment, not to the betterment of the general population. You weren't a nuisance last time. You're not a nuisance this time. They're just harassing you because you did not do what they expected you to do, because that's what they were told by their superiors. That's what they were told in their HR class, but they weren't properly educated. So you can either do that or know what your animal does for you, and then if they ask, you can tell them. Or you can just shut the whole situation down. If you have a service animal vest to put on your animal, you can put that service animal vest on your animal. And if you have a service animal ID card, you are not required to have that by law because the government does not regulate service animals. Because the government does not regulate service animals, there are no government entities for you to register your service animal with that has more authorization than any other private entity where you can register your animal. So you can simply register your animal for free at servicedogregistry.org, and you can register your service animal. They'll give you a serial number, a registration number for your service animal. If they were to go and look up your service animal on that site, they would see what your service animal was registered for, and which is one of the reasons why. Here's another tip: establishments will tell you, you got to give me the registration number for your service animal. No, you don't. That's a violation of HIPAA law. I do not have to. I choose to. I do not have to give you that, because asking for that is like asking for the case number to my last surgery. You are not legally allowed to ask them. So I actually had this issue in a old-fashioned restaurant that was really backwards old-fashioned style. It was a 1964 built establishment that to this day is not socially apt and also very compromising to disabled people as well as service animals. This restaurant was called Ray's. It's in Alabama. Terrible place to go. The coffee was burnt, and I'm not just saying that because I had a bad time. I mean, all I had there was the coffee, and the coffee was burnt like McDonald's coffee. It was bad. And I came in with a service dog, sat down. They came to the table, and we were going to order food to go, and we're traveling. So this is the first stop we've made in 15 hours. We're traveling by car, and we wanted to stop, grab something to eat to go. And they harassed us about the dogs until we just left. All we were able to get was a cup of coffee. Because they recognized that we had a service dog, they harassed us about the dog. They wanted the registration information about the dog. They even called the police about it. So, which is why I tell you, this place is not a good place to go if you have a service animal. You just don't go to certain places that are not service animal friendly. And anybody who has respect for disabled people should protest these establishments and just not bring them any business until they change their behavior, because they are compromising the ability for disabled people to be able to function in normal society. And this actually becomes a huger situation these days than before, because a lot more veterans are coming home with health issues, and these veterans are in possession of service animals. These animals are not retired war animals. These are animals that were assigned to veterans or ex-military personnel because of the condition that they came back with. So a man or woman has served their country for 10, 20 years, comes back, and now every time they leave their house, they're being interrogated. And the person who walks up doesn't always recognize that. That just because it's two questions from you, you feel like it's not that big of a deal. But it's two questions from you. It's two questions from the person at the front desk, two questions from the person at the other desk, two questions from the person at the other desk, two questions from the person in the hallway. I mean, if it's just so much as an autograph, after a few hundred people ask me for my autograph, I'm tired of giving my autograph. I don't want to do this. I want to exist without having to stop what I'm doing and sign my name on this paper. So that two questions, it's equivalent to, just like I said to somebody before, it's like, you wear glasses. How would you feel if somebody came to you and asked you, are those prescription glasses? What do you wear those glasses for? Every time you go into public. So you have 20, 30, 40 people in the building alone that you just walked into, a couple hundred people a week, a few thousand people a month, just because you have prescription glasses. That is the problem that they're not paying attention to, is that, oh, they're restricted to and only allowed to ask these two questions. They are not required to ask these questions. They are not required to engage you at all. And one of the things that they need to recognize is that in a civil suit, each person will be named in the civil suit. And if you are the third, fifth, eighth person that I've talked to today about this situation, or the second, third, or fourth person that I've had over the 3 or 4 times that I've come here, where you've asked the same question to me every time I've come in here because you see me on the camera and that gave you the right to come and engage me. No. You yourself are responsible for your own decisions. You are not protected by the company that you work for. So if you are that person that wants to go and engage a person that has a service animal, my recommendation is this. There are 2 reasons why the animal is there. One of them you cannot determine because it is a medical issue. The other one is the animal trained? If the animal is trained is determined by observation. So if the animal is a public nuisance, that means that the animal is climbing on top of people, jumping up and down, knocking stuff over, breaking things, trying to dig a hole through the floor, chewing up stuff. That doesn't mean that if the animal is in the building and they use the bathroom in the building that the animal is unruly. No, there are situations where the owner didn't walk the animal enough, they wasn't paying attention to what was going on, they were in a hurry, the animal used the bathroom in the building. The owner is responsible for cleaning up behind the animal. The establishment is not required to clean up behind the animal. The establishment is not required to feed the animal. The establishment is not required to give the animal water. If you ask for that where you are, and they are willing to provide that, that is a courtesy, that is not a requirement. But just because the animal may have used the bathroom and the floor because you have not walked the animal sufficiently enough before you brought the animal into the building does not make the animal a public nuisance. But if the animal is tearing up the walls or knocking stuff over, breaking things, that's a public nuisance. If the animal is chasing people through the store, if the animal is knocking people down and not following your commands, if you're chasing your animal through the store, these are things that make your animal a public nuisance. It is not perceived to be trained. Now, in those situations, that's when they say, oh, well, let me go over here and go talk to this guy. And that's your dog? Yeah. Is it a service animal? Yeah. What task is this animal supposed to provide you, right? What service is it doing, right? Now, yeah, so that's when you ask those questions. When the animal is the subject of public nuisance. This means that if the animal is contained, if the animal is behaved, that you never engage the animal. But if the animal is a problem, then you go and you engage the owner. Now, once you come to determine that the animal is a service animal, the animal is providing a service, or the animal is being trained to provide a service, because the most recent laws have updated that service animals in training have the same rights to exist in public with its trainer as it would with a disabled party as a trained service animal. So if you go into public, you're training a service animal, and the animal is not behaving the way you would prefer the animal to behave, the owner of the animal or the trainer of the animal reserves the right to remove the animal from the building when the animal is not behaving well enough, as long as the animal is not disturbing or disrupting the environment by destroying or defacing the environment, or injuring or potentially causing injury to someone near the animal. The establishment cannot tell you that because you're training this animal you can't be here. That's not true. Because in order for the animal to function in public, the animal has to be trained to function in public. And how do you train an animal to function in public? Bring them into the public, right? Okay, so here's the other thing. You can travel with up to 2 service animals at a time, specifically because you can have a service animal that is performing a job for you, and you could be training another service animal to perform the same job. Two, one that knows what to do, one that's learning what to do, not 10. You can't bring more dogs than the dog pound from snooting them. You can't do all that too. So, um, another one of those things that I was saying before that you can do while you're out and about and you're doing what you're trying to do to increase or not increase, but decrease the quantity of harassment that you're going to encounter on a day-to-day basis is when somebody comes up, and you're going to know, because it's going to be a manager that is in an area where managers normally aren't. There's going to be a security guard or a police officer, and they're going to come up and approach you, and you have not committed a crime. You have not violated any laws, rules, or policies. So you already know when they walk up that they are here to address the fact that you have a dog with you. So when that happens, what you could do to curve the whole situation is reach into your purse, your wallet, or your pocket, wherever, pull out the service dog identification card that you have for your service animal, hand it to the person. They can read the identification card. It will show them that the owner's name, it will show the name of the animal, it should show a photo of the animal. Depending on what kind of card you get, you may get one that has the photo of the owner so that they can correlate the ownership of the animal with the owner. And then it will have the registration number of the animal, the website of where to go to see the registration of the animal, and depending on the service animal card, it may in fact show you what the animal is there for. So I've got one here, and we're going to kind of block a little bit of this stuff, but what we've got here is a service animal card here that if you look at that, it will have your service dog. It'll have the photo of your service dog. It'll have service dog up there. It will have I've got all the information covered up, but it has on this particular card the name of the handler, the name of the dog, the breed of the dog, the ID number of the dog, the website where you can go to see the registration of the dog. And if you go to that website's registration and put in the registration number for this particular animal on this particular ID card, you can see what it's registered for, which is why they can't ask you for the registration number, because that's confidential information. But you can volunteer it. So if you show them your service animal card, then they look at the card. No questions needs to be asked after that. Now, in a civil suit, and I'm going to keep going back to these civil suits, the civil suit starts with the establishment knowing that there's a service animal present, and they're still harassing you or depriving you of equal access or equal enjoyment of the establishment. So the first thing you can do to curb harassment is to, one, put a service animal vest on your animal if you can. And if you can, or if you forgot, whatever. The second thing is showing them a service dog identification card. It is not required by law. If they ask you for it, they can't ask you for it. They're not supposed to. They can, they're not supposed to. It's against the law to ask you for that because that violates your HIPAA laws. But if they were to ask you, do you have an ID card for the service animal, you can tell them for your own safety that you should never ask for an ID card, but I do actually have an ID card, and I will volunteer it to you for the sake of this discussion so that you can put it in your records to never engage me again. Because now you're looking at, well, I've shown them the service dog tag on X date. They documented the fact that this particular service animal, which will be recognized every time it enters the building, has a service dog identification card. Then you go back to that same entity if you have to, and somebody else comes and engages you. You've already identified yourself to security the last time you were here. You are not going to do it again. Now, That's when they can escalate the situation all they want, because in a lawsuit, you've notified the establishment, you are a return customer, patient, whatever, and they are continuing to harass you because every time you come, you are minding your business, standing in one place away from the general population, and you are approached unnecessarily by an employee of the establishment, and they are questioning you and interrogating you about your service animal when they have previous knowledge of it being a service animal. So, in these situations, you are to tell them, you know, uh, I've already identified my service animal. The last time I was here last week. They're going to give you an excuse. Well, I wasn't here last week. That's fine. Go talk to the person that I talked to last time, and just don't answer any questions. Don't engage them in a conversation. And if they decide to say, well, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, and then you're going to tell them, well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have to refuse, and just ignore them. And you're going to keep walking. If you're walking, you're going to keep walking. If you were standing still and you decide that you want to start walking, you start walking. You know, if you're shopping, they cannot stop you from shopping. And you want to record the entire scenario, because if they stop you from shopping, they are impeding on your equal access and equal enjoyment. Now, just because the person that's harassing you about it right now wasn't updated by the other person that talked to you, doesn't change the fact that when you sue the establishment and everybody involved is getting sued. So that's why I explained to you earlier that if you are a person that decides that you want to engage somebody with a service animal, that you probably should reduce the impact that you have on a situation by only going over there when the animal is a public nuisance. However, for you guys that you want to take your animal on a trip, you want to get on a plane, TSA is going to be a lot more aggressive than the average mall cop. So while you understand that having a service animal could potentially be compromising to your access to your flight, you don't want to delay your flight by having this conversation. So what you want to do is you want to first, if you've got you a registered service animal, most registered service animals are chipped. That means that you can contact the I actually use Home Again. A lot of people have other ways of going about registering their animal and then chipping their animal. But if you registered your animal and your animal is chipped, when you chip your animal, you give your service dog registration information to the company that chipped your animal. Then when you decide to travel, you notify the company that chipped your animal in advance. They will send you a document that says that you are taking your animal on a trip. Now, you take that document and you give it to the airline of your choosing, that you're wherever you're getting your ticket from. So when they give you the ticket, it is documented in their system that you will be accompanied by a service animal. Now, you're going to take your airplane ticket, your document from the company that chipped your animal, and you're going to have your service dog identification cards. And when you walk up to whoever is going to be giving you the rundown on the possession of your animals, you're going to provide them with all of these documents at the exact same time. Soon as you walk up on somebody that is designed to stop you from making your flight, you just hand them all this information at one point. Don't even give them the opportunity to ask the questions. Like, hey, these are the papers for my service dog. Out the gate. As soon as you get ready to walk through the metal detector, these are the papers for my service dog. As soon as you get ready to board the flight, you hand them the ticket and you hand them, these are the papers for my service animal. If you bought two tickets, and they should be side by side, you bought two tickets. Hey, well, I've got checking in for me and my dogs. These are the papers for my dogs. Boom. That saves you so much argument. That saves you so much drama. But for awareness purposes, they're not supposed to ask you for any of that information. You are allowed to volunteer the information, but they are not legally authorized to ask you for that information. And if somebody comes and tells you that they are required by law to come and engage you with a service animal, that's a lie. They are not required by law to engage you when you're in possession of a service animal. They are restricted by law as to what they can ask you about your service animal. But if somebody saw your dog and they thought your dog was cute, doesn't matter if it's a service dog or not, they came up, oh, your dog is cute. What kind of dog is it? How long have you had it? How old is it? Did you train it yourself? These are not questions about a service animal. These are questions about a dog. Doesn't matter if it's a trained service animal or not. If it's not on a leash and you decided to ask the question, how do you keep your animal by your side if it doesn't have a leash? Oh, well, I trained it to follow my voice commands, my body language. If I move, it moves. And I have this device. And if you have an electronic device and they see the electronic device, you can literally have a peaceful conversation with somebody about how beautiful and well trained their dog is, which de escalates the situation out the gate. Never actually asking them whether or not it is a service animal, never inquiring, because it doesn't matter. What matters is that the animal is trained. That's the only thing that matters. Is it trained? So if it's trained, it doesn't matter if the owner trained it or if the owner paid somebody to train it. If it's trained, then there's no issue, as long as the animal is not engaging the other people in the room in a negative fashion. So if you're that person and you work for security or you're the manager of a whatever, and you see these dogs and somebody radios you and says, hey, somebody's walking into the store with the dogs, and you decide that you want to go over there and you want to go mess with them, because that's what you're doing when you decide to engage them. You want to go over there and you want to go mess with them. So when you do that, remember this: you are legally only allowed to ask two questions when you recognize that it is a service animal. Those two questions are, is it a service animal, and what service does it provide? However, if you thought, hey, this dog is cute, you take good care of your dog. What kind of dog is it? Oh, okay. Um, how long have you had it? A few years? Cool. Did you train him yourself? Who did you train? Who trained your dog? You trained him? Oh, that is awesome. How did you do it? You've got the training device with you. Oh, okay. So you're still training this one, but you train that one over there. Oh, that is awesome. Do you see how that conversation is not intrusive? It's not threatening. And then just being able to have that conversation is like, that is an amazing dog. He's so well behaved. I'm proud. I don't have dogs that better that good with that level of training. Saying things like that. It's like, oh man, how did you do that? I want to train my dog that way. You are asking questions that will hint towards, oh, that's a trained service animal. Like, for example, I've got one that's 11 years old. I've been training that dog for 9 years. I've got one that's 2 years old. I've been training that dog for 18 months. you know just asking certain questions that are not, you don't care if it's a service animal. You're just like, hey, how did you get your dogs to behave so well? Well, this one's a trained service animal. I'm still training it to function off the leash. So eventually, if I'm coming to this place on a regular basis, they're going to see this animal off the leash. That one is a veteran trained service animal. That one over there is 11 years old. This one's been off the leash for at least 9 years, which is why you don't see a leash on that one. But this one over here is being trained to function off the leash. I have an electronic device that operates both the animals if any one of them gets out of sorts. But as it stands, they're only supposed to be here to orbit my person and put distance between me and the general population in case I have a health problem. Now, that conversation, because you were talking to me about my animals, not determining if I'm justifiably allowed to have service animals in the building, that particular type of conversation, one, is a lot more positive, and two, you get all the answers that you need without having to be intrusive. You just went over there to compliment their animal and their animal's positive behavior, and you just wanted to know more about, how they get their animal to function so well. That reduces conflict, and it also eliminates the chaos in an engagement with somebody with an animal. Now, for an establishment, if you're going to make it a policy that you're going to engage people without an incident, which causes an incident, about their service animal, you don't want all of your employees to go over there and go and engage everybody with an animal. But if you're going to assign somebody to go over there and engage people with an animal, what you need to do is you need to keep a record of that. Now, that does not mean that you need to get the name and the name of the owner and all this other stuff. But if you've got this animal, you got it on surveillance. Just about every establishment in the country has surveillance. You got this animal under surveillance. You can take a screenshot of that from your surveillance camera, print out a photo, put that up into your security room, and tell all of your employees, this person has a trained service animal. Do not engage unless the animal becomes a problem. Now, if the employee knows that boss man or boss lady talked to this person once before. I ain't going over there. Now, the owner of the service animal walks into the entity, only has to engage the establishment one time, and never again will the establishment engage that person when that person comes back into that establishment. That is how you keep the torment off of that person. However, there are going to be a lot of times where people are going to come and they're going to stop you at the gate, and they're going to harass you about the animal. Oh, what you're doing here. You can't have it without a leash. You got to do this. You got to do that. Oh, it's supposed to have ID. It's supposed to have a harness. It's supposed to have this. It's supposed to have that. It's not supposed to have none of that stuff. You do not have to answer any of those questions. You don't have to provide them with the identification cards. You do not have to have a service dog vest, and they still cannot stop you from accessing the building. And if they do deny you access to the building, you can document it for your records. And then after you document it for your records, then you can sue them for that, and then you can still engage this environment, and because they can't deny you access because you sued them, because that's retaliation. So you can sue them again. See what I'm saying? So these are things that you need to take into consideration when you're traveling with your service animal. So if you've got the time, I know that it's a trend these days for people to audit their right to exist in this country, and they deliberately go places and force a negative engagement so that they can audit the reaction of the establishment. Don't do that. If you don't need to take your service animal with you, you don't have to take your service animal with you, and you don't have to take your service animal with you every time you leave the house. But if you take your service animal with you every other time you leave the house, just because you went to that establishment without your service animal one time does not mean that you don't need your service animal today. But that also doesn't mean that you should bring your service animal somewhere just so that you can get into a confrontation with somebody. There are places where, while they legally cannot stop you from bringing your service animal there, do you really want to go there if you have a service animal? For example, you got certain places like bars, clubs, strip clubs, night joints, smoking places. Do you really want to bring your service animal to chaotic places like that for them to even engage you negatively about your service animal? Again, here's another thing. Going to the range. You can take your dog to the range. They're going to recommend that you don't. And I'm going to recommend that you don't. If you go to the range and you don't have somebody there to keep your service animal outside of the shooting area, don't bring your animal, because your animal has a heightened level of hearing. Bringing your animal into a closed area where the echoes from the discharge of the firearm could negatively impact the hearing of your animal. You don't want to put your animal through that. You don't want to be in a crowded place unnecessarily with your service animal. You do not want to be in an area with a lot of noise and a lot of smoke with your animal unless you have to. So that doesn't mean that you can't go to the fair, you can't go to the park, you can't go watch the fireworks. But if you've got PTSD and you've got a service animal for PTSD, you're about as unnerved about the fireworks as your dog. So you're probably not going to go to that. But that doesn't mean that you can't take your dog to the beach. You can go to the beach with your dog, play with him in the sand, everything like that. A little mini vacation for you and your dog. And guaranteed, because if you go to a beach that's not a dog beach, and you're on the beach, you're probably the only dog, or only pair of dogs if you go with two dogs, the only pair of dogs that travel. You might be the only two dogs on the beach within 100 miles. And because they haven't seen a dog on this beach, because this isn't a dog beach, everybody with a badge, every lifeguard is going to be pulling up on you on ATVs and radioing in and everything like that. And, oh, you can't be here. Yes, I can. And they can harass you. And you can, like I said, do one or two things. You can tell them the truth. You can educate them on it, which will escalate the situation, because anybody who believes that they have the authority to harass you are not going to believe that they're wrong for harassing you. And then the second part is that because they're trying to suppress your right to be there because they're not used to you having the right to be there in that capacity, you're challenging their authority. And because you're challenging their authority, they're going to try to assert their authority on you even more. And that's where the other problem comes in at. So if you want to either de-escalate the problem or minimize the escalation of the problem as soon as it arises, the first thing you do when you see them approaching, go to keep your identification cards for your service animals on your person. If you have service dog vests, put them on your animals so that when you're out in public, if you're at the beach or whatever, and you have your service animals with you on the beach, you keep your service dog vests on your animals and keep your animals close to you. Don't let your animal chase the frisbee down the way, or that's what you do at the dog park. Your animal is at your side. If you're sitting there making a sandcastle, your animal's sitting there digging a hole with you. If you're in the water, your animal's probably with the other person that's accompanying you at the edge of the water. If you're going to the dog beach and there's 2 or 3 people with you, somebody has the ability to maintain control of your animal while you're in the water, and when you're not in the water, you have control over your animal. Or you might not want to get in the water, which is probably one of the reasons why you brought the animal. You're going to the beach with somebody else. They're going to play in the water. You're going to stay on the shore with your service animal. All of these things apply, and somebody comes up and engages you. You show them the service dog information, and they go on about their day. Now, I know that when you have situations where they want to ID you because you have a service animal, they're gonna come like these service animal cards that I have my name on it as the handler and has the service dog's name and the service dog's identification number on it. Now, there are other identification cards that just has the dog's information on it and a separate ID card for the owner. And that still qualifies. If you hand them an identification card that tells them the name of the dog, the breed of the dog, the serial number for the dog, and the registration location that they can find any information they want about the dog, you can provide that without actually providing your identification. And that falls into a whole nother area of legality, because since you haven't committed a crime, just because they came and asked you questions about your service dog doesn't mean that you need to provide them with any information about yourself. You don't need to give them your driver's license to show that you are the owner of the dogs or anything like that. You don't have to succumb to any other search or anything like that just because a cop came and asked you about your service animal. If the purpose of your investigation was the animal investigation was resolved with the service dog identification. So you do not need to document that you talked to me. You need to document that you received identification for the animals. And that's it. That's the end of the investigation. So I don't have to give you my driver's license or my state ID because you came to harass me about my service dogs, because I didn't commit a crime. And that's another thing that you need to remember when you're in an establishment. You didn't commit a crime in the establishment. You're not stealing the place. You're not vandalizing the place. So they cannot harass you with law enforcement or the threat of law enforcement because you didn't commit a crime. So they're like, well, I'll call the police if you don't answer my questions, or you're going to have to leave if you don't answer my questions. Okay, I'm not leaving until I'm done here, and I don't have to answer any questions because you don't, because you're not breaking any laws. Now, when law enforcement comes up, they're going to want to ID you because that's what they're told to do. They're told to ID you. Well, I didn't do anything to require you to ID me, so I don't have to ID myself. Now, there's going to be a whole nother area coming involved when there's other factors in play that are beyond that of a service animal. But when it's just you and your animals, there are things you don't have to do, but you can do that to make your situation less complex. And there are things that you can do to make your situation less complex, but you want to make sure that each time they engage you, that you get their information. They wanna interrogate you about your service animal. Well, who are you? So if you're the security guard that works for the Publix, or you're the security guard that works for the Walmart, or if you're the department manager of automotives and you're over at self-checkout and you're interrogating me about my service animal, who are you? You identify that person. They can refuse to identify themselves, and you can refuse to engage them in conversation. Because it's like, look, if you're here to talk to me, you need to identify yourself for the record. This will be the third or fourth or fifth or eighth time that I've talked to an employee of this establishment. So we are involving you now in civil litigation for harassment, compromising, or well, it would be discrimination, not specifically harassment. It would be discrimination towards a disabled person, targeting a disabled person. It would be in that particular type of scenario, compromising the disabled person's equal access and or equal enjoyment of the public amenities that are provided. You're in that establishment, you're either, if it's a medical facility, you're either a patient or you're accompanying a patient where you are providing assistance to that patient. Or if you're in a public place where you're purchasing something, you're a paying customer. In any of those scenarios, you're not just hanging around for the sake of hanging around, you're there for a purpose, and they're compromising your ability to perform that purpose. As a result, that leads up to a lawsuit. So when you're explaining it to them in that factor, it's like, look, I don't have a problem with cooperating with your investigation if you're going to cooperate with my investigation. Because now I am preparing a civil action against your establishment because of behavior of you and other employees that behave the way you're behaving right now. So if you're not willing to cooperate with my investigation, then we have nothing else to talk about. You end the conversation and you ignore them from that point on. And they can get in your way if they like to. And if your service animals respond negatively because they are applying unnecessary psychological damage to your condition, then, that's on them because they're impeding on your personal space. Now, you have the ability to say, I don't want to go through this, and you can leave. Do that. I'm not doing that. And then you can just keep going. Now, you can walk into a Walmart and they can tell the guy about the dog, and you're already inside the building. Just keep walking. You don't have to stop and talk to them. You can just keep going. If you're standing somewhere, you're waiting on somebody, and somebody comes up and starts asking questions, you don't have to answer any of the questions. They can tell you to leave, and you don't have to go in. They can't put their hands on you, so they can't make you leave. If you just stand there and ignore them, and you stand there for an hour, then you're standing there for an hour. They can stand there for an hour with you. They can call police, and police can come, and they can stand there for an hour with the security guards and you. And, they can go through the process, and you don't answer any questions. You know what I'm saying? Or, like I said before, you show them some documentation that you're not legally required to show them. You're volunteering the information to de-escalate the scenario. But once you provide that information, it's like, look, now you need to take this information down and tell everybody that works here, don't talk to me again. Because now, when I come back the second time, the third time, the fifth time, after you have confirmed that I am in possession of a service animal the first time, the second, third, and fourth time, you're targeting me because I have a service animal. That's where the lawsuit comes in. That's where civil action becomes in your favor, because now you have an establishment that recognizes you're in possession of a service animal. They recognize the animal is in capacity of active duty, and they are deliberately coming over and harassing you without any other altercation having to happen, and they are tormenting you because you are in the building with the service animal. That is when you end up with very, very nice, very, very large service animals. So while it is very frustrating to engage with a service animal, the general population, while it is very frustrating because you have to deal with less access, you have to deal with other people petting your service animal without permission, you have to contain your animal, you have to go through a whole lot more because you got to walk your animal before you go into the building, walk your animal after you go into the building. You have to, you have a lot more stuff to deal with because if you're bringing your service animal with you and you're going shopping, now you have to carry your animal and the stuff that you're going shopping with. There's a lot of other things you have to deal with before you get to these people that are harassing you about your animal. And when these people come to harass you about your animal, you're probably at your wit's end. So understandably, you're going to be pretty frustrated. And you're probably not going to respond in a kind and compassionate way. You're probably going to respond sharp and short-tempered, very concise. But if you remember, look, I got these dogs, I'm supposed to legally have these animals, and I have a way to de-escalate the situation without it going any further. And in that particular scenario, you just remember, hey, if you've got these, when you see the guy walking to come talk to you, pull them out. When you pull them out and they come up and, hey, how you doing? It's like, I know what you're here for. You're here about the dogs. These are the identification cards for the service animals. They're going to look at them. Okay. And they may even still decide to ask you those questions. I don't answer questions. You recognize that they're a service animal and they're here because they're service animals. I don't have to answer any more questions after that. Once I showed you these identification cards, you're asking those questions as your policy to determine if it's a service animal. I'm showing you identification cards to show you that they're legally registered service animals. That's it. Once I show you them cards, it's like, have a good day, sir. That's it. They walk up. I know what you're here for. Here you go. These are the cards for the service animals. Here you go. You look at them, and then after they look at them, you get them back and thank you, sir. Have a good day. Or thank you, ma'am. Have a good day. And don't talk to them after that. If you were in the midst of walking, keep walking. If you were sitting there or standing there, keep doing what you were doing. Don't acknowledge them after that. Because the more that you acknowledge them, the more you give them the power to escalate the situation into a negative fashion. The more that they get you irate, the more that they can use your behavior responding to their harassment as an excuse to continue to harass you. And if you allow them to escalate your situation, then you put yourself in a compromising position that causes you to have unnecessary stress. Your argument with them can lead to a point where they tell you to leave, even though they don't have the legal right to do that. But because they're doing it, now you have a choice of staying or waiting for the police. Then when the police come, now you have a choice of arguing the same argument with the police or showing the police the same information you could have showed the other guys to make the other guy stop. And at some point, you're going to end up caving and saying, look, here are the papers. These are service animals. They're harassing me. They won't leave me alone. And, I just want to get this on record. So, and now you got to provide all this other information. You're signing papers. You had a time schedule that you were trying to meet, and your time schedule's been thrown off because this person decided to be a dick and come and harass you about your service animals. So it sucks being different. And in this country, being different is not okay, because if it was, then the different person would never receive any different treatment. But because you're different, everyone has to ask questions. And it's harassing. It's very harassing just because you're different. So that's all I have for you today. My name is Xander with This and That, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. Tonight we have a show Tuesday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, 6 Pacific. I want you guys to tune in. And you guys have a good day. Also, follow us on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, Stay Keen. And also, definitely, you want to like, subscribe, and share here on the YouTube channel. If you have any questions about this, or if you have any other topics that you would like to talk about on This and That, we can do some research for you and provide you with all the information that we have. I just want to say as a disclaimer that in this particular show, I did not provide any legal advice. These are just the do's and don'ts of being in possession of a service animal, what you should know about how you should go about carrying yourself, conducting yourself while you're in possession of a service animal, and some less conflictual ways that you can go about addressing your engagement with the general population of a service animal. So I am not a lawyer. I am not providing you with any legal advice, but I just wanted you guys to know that today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you in tonight's show.